The metallic taste hits Sandra Collins' tongue like a slap of reality. Water. Pure, tasteless water where life-saving insulin should be. Her hands tremble as she stares at the small vial, knowing that somewhere in this massive corporate building, CEO Frank Harrison is about to inject what he believes is his medication. But what happened next shocked everyone who heard this story. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, just 30 minutes earlier. Sandra pushes her cleaning cart through the marble corridors of Harrison Industries at exactly 6:47 a.m., same as she has every weekday for the past 3 years. The building hums with that pre-dawn silence that only janitors and security guards know. She's always been punctual, always been invisible, always been grateful for this job that puts food on her daughter Maya's table and keeps their small apartment heated through Detroit's brutal winters. Morning, Sandra calls out Jim, the overnight security guard, as she passes his desk. Morning, Jim. Coffee's fresh in the break room if you want some. This is her routine, her sanctuary of predictability. But little did Sandra know that this morning would shatter everything she thought she understood about her workplace. She reaches the executive floor, her keycard beeping softly as she enters Frank Harrison's corner office. The man himself won't arrive for another 2 hours, but Sandra knows his schedule better than he does. She's seen him every morning for months, watched him fumble with his insulin injection, noticed how his hands shake slightly from years of managing his type 1 diabetes while running a Fortune 500 company. Sandra begins dusting his mahogany desk when something catches her eye. The small medical cooler where Frank keeps his insulin sits slightly askew, its lid not quite properly closed. She's noticed Frank's obsessive precision with this cooler before. He always seals it perfectly, always places it in the exact same spot. Her cleaning rag pauses mid-swipe. Something feels wrong. Sandra, you're being paranoid, she whispers to herself, but her grandmother's voice echoes in her memory. Child, when something don't feel right, it probably ain't right. She glances toward the door, then back at the cooler. Her curiosity wars with her professionalism, but concern wins. She carefully opens the lid and examines the insulin vial inside. It looks normal, clear liquid in a standard pharmaceutical container. But the placement seems off, like someone handled it recently. Her phone buzzes with a text from her babysitter. Maya's fever is getting worse. You might want to come home early. Sandra's stomach clenches. Maya's been battling recurring infections since her premature birth 8 years ago, and Sandra's insurance barely covers the basics. She needs this job more than her next breath, but her daughter needs her too. She's about to close the cooler when she hears footsteps in the hallway. Panic floods her system. If someone finds her examining Frank's medical supplies, she'll be fired on the spot. But the footsteps continue past the office, and Sandra exhales slowly. That's when she notices it, the faintest scent of something chemical, almost bleach-like, coming from the insulin vial. Her hands freeze. Insulin should be odorless. This decision would change everything. She'll think later, but right now Sandra Collins just knows something is terribly, dangerously wrong. She's seen Frank inject his insulin every morning at exactly 8:30 a.m., right before his first meeting. She's watched him check his blood sugar, calculate his dose with practiced precision. She's even seen him during a mild low blood sugar episode, confused and shaky until the glucose tablets kicked in. If this insulin is compromised, if someone has tampered with it, Frank Harrison could die. The rational part of her mind screams warnings. You're a cleaning lady, not a doctor. You're imagining things. You'll lose your job. Maya needs this insurance. But her grandmother's voice grows louder. Sometimes being right matters more than being safe. Sandra looks at her phone. 7:15 a.m. Frank will be here in 45 minutes, and his Monday morning routine is as predictable as sunrise. She could replace the vial, pretend she never noticed, continue her shift, and collect her paycheck. Or she could trust her instincts and potentially save a man's life. Her hands shake as she unscrews the cap of the insulin vial. The liquid inside looks completely normal, crystal clear like it should be. But that faint chemical smell persists, and something deep in her gut screams danger. Sandra Collins takes a deep breath, knowing this single moment will define everything that follows. She raises the vial to her lips, and before she can second-guess herself, she takes the smallest possible taste of what should be Frank Harrison's life-saving insulin. The truth hits her immediately, cold and terrifying. But the real shock was still coming. The plastic cap barely makes a sound as Sandra pops it open, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knows this is crazy. Who tastes someone's medicine? But something deep in her gut screams that Frank's life depends on this moment. The liquid touches her tongue, and her worst fears crystallize into terrifying reality. Water. Plain, tasteless water where life-saving insulin should be. "Oh my God," Sandra whispers, her voice cracking as the magnitude hits her. Someone deliberately switched Frank's medication. Someone wants him dead. Her hands shake as she caps the vial, mind racing through the implications. Frank could go into diabetic shock at any moment. She's seen it before. Her late husband struggled with diabetes for years before the cancer took him. The memory of those emergency room visits floods back, and she knows exactly how little time they might have. Sandra's phone buzzes with a text from her daughter Maya. "Mom, the doctor wants to see me again next week. Says we need to discuss treatment options." The medical bills are already crushing them, but Sandra pushes that thought aside. Right now, Frank Harrison needs her. She rushes toward Frank's office, the vial clutched in her sweaty palm. Peter Lawson intercepts her in the hallway, his perfectly pressed suit and cold smile making her skin crawl. "Sandra, right? Is there something you need?" His tone carries that condescending edge that makes her jaw clench. "Mr. Lawson, I need to speak with you about Mr. Harrison's insulin. There's been a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Peter's eyebrows arch with manufactured concern. "I'm sure whatever housekeeping issue you've discovered can wait. Mr. Harrison is in important meetings all day. This isn't about housekeeping." Sandra's voice rises before she catches herself. She can't afford to lose this job, not with Maya's medical expenses mounting. Someone switched his insulin with water. He could die. Peter's expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind his eyes. "That's quite an accusation, Sandra. Are you absolutely certain? Because making false claims about medical emergencies is a serious matter." The way he emphasizes serious matter sends chills down Sandra's spine. Why isn't he alarmed? Why isn't he rushing to check on Frank? "I tasted it myself," she says, watching his reaction carefully. "It's just water." "You tasted it?" Peter laughs, but there's no warmth in the sound. "Sandra, I understand you're trying to be helpful, but you're clearly overstepping your boundaries here. Mr. Harrison manages his own medical care. Something's wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Any normal person would be racing to help their boss, calling paramedics, doing something. But Peter stands there like she's announced the weather forecast. But what if? What if nothing? Peter cuts her off, his voice hardening. "I think you've been watching too many medical dramas. Mr. Harrison is fine, his insulin is fine, and you need to focus on your actual job duties. Is that clear?" Sandra feels the weight of her daughter's medical bills, the stack of past due notices on her kitchen counter, the precarious nature of this job that keeps them afloat. But she also feels the weight of Frank Harrison's life in her hands. Her phone buzzes again. Maya texting, "Mom, I'm scared about what the doctor might say." The irony cuts deep. Here she is, possibly holding the key to saving one life while her own daughter faces medical uncertainty. But that's exactly why she understands how precious every moment is when someone's health hangs in the balance. "Mr. Lawson," Sandra says carefully, "I need you to understand something. I've been cleaning offices for 15 years, and I've never once interfered with anyone's personal belongings or medical supplies. The fact that I'm standing here telling you this should tell you how serious I believe this situation is." Peter steps closer, and she can smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, the sharp scent of nervous sweat. "And I need you to understand something, Sandra. False alarms, especially ones that disrupt important business operations, don't look good on employee records. They can lead to reassignments. Or worse. The threat hangs in the air between them like poison gas. Sandra's mind flashes to Maya's worried face, to the stack of medical bills, to the possibility of losing everything they've barely managed to hold on to. But then she thinks about Frank Harrison slumping over his desk, going into diabetic shock while his assistant covers it up for reasons she can't begin to fathom. I understand completely, Sandra says quietly, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. And I think it's time someone else understood too. She turns away from Peter's suddenly pale face, pulling out her phone as she walks toward the nearest exit. Her fingers hover over the numbers as Peter calls after her, his voice losing its controlled composure for the first time. Sandra. Wait, let's talk about this reasonably. But Sandra Collins has spent her entire life being reasonable, being quiet, being invisible. Today, for Frank Harrison and for her daughter and for every person who ever needed someone to speak up when it mattered most, she's done being reasonable. Her finger moves toward the 9, and everything changes forever. The phone trembles in Sandra's hand as she stares at the 3 numbers that could change everything. Her heart pounds against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Behind her, Peter Lawson's cold eyes bore into her back, waiting for her answer to his ultimatum. Think carefully about this, Sandra, Peter's voice cuts through the silence like a blade. I'm offering you $10,000 to forget what you think you saw. That's more money than you'll make in 6 months cleaning toilets. Sandra's grip tightens on the phone. The weight of her daughter's medical bills crushes down on her shoulders, but something deeper rises within her chest. Her grandmother's voice echoes in her memory, "Baby girl, when you're faced with doing what's right versus doing what's easy, remember that your character is tested in those moments." You don't understand, Sandra whispers, her voice gaining strength with each word. This isn't about money. Mr. Harrison could die. Peter steps closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the antiseptic smell of the office. Frank's fine. He's probably just having a rough day. Diabetics have episodes all the time. But Sandra has already seen too much. Through the glass partition, she watches Frank Harrison slumped in his chair, his skin growing paler by the minute. His breathing appears shallow, labored. The successful CEO who commanded boardrooms now looks fragile, vulnerable, completely unaware that his trusted assistant has betrayed him in the most heinous way possible. Look, Peter's tone shifts, becoming almost paternal. You're a smart woman, Sandra. You've got a daughter to think about. College isn't cheap these days. This money could change your life. For a heartbeat, Sandra wavers. $10,000 would cover Keisha's asthma treatments for months. It would pay for the tutoring her daughter needs to keep up in advanced placement classes. It would buy them breathing room in a life that has always felt like drowning. But then Frank's coffee mug catches her eye, sitting innocently on his desk. The same mug she'd watched him prepare his insulin injection beside just an hour ago. The same injection that tasted like nothing but tap water when she forced herself to test it. He trusted you, Sandra says, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Harrison trusted you with his life. Peter's mask finally slips. His polished exterior cracks, revealing something dark and desperate underneath. You have no idea what you're dealing with here, Sandra. Frank's been planning to restructure the company. Half our department is getting laid off next month. Including me. The confession hangs in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Sandra's blood runs cold as the full picture crystallizes. This isn't just negligence or an accident. This is attempted murder, plain and simple. So you decided to kill him? The words tumble from her lips before she can stop them. I decided to solve a problem, Peter snaps, his composure completely shattered now. Do you know what it's like to build your entire life around a company, only to have some corporate restructuring destroy everything? I've given 15 years to this place. Through the glass, Frank's condition appears to be deteriorating. His head lolls to one side, and Sandra can see his chest rising and falling in irregular patterns. Every second they waste arguing is another step closer to tragedy. Sandra lifts the phone, her finger hovering over the first number. I understand you're scared, Peter. But this isn't the way. Put the phone down, Sandra. Peter's voice turns menacing. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Your daughter's medical treatments, gone. Your apartment, gone. Everything you've worked for, destroyed. The threat should terrify her, but instead it ignites something fierce and protective in Sandra's chest. She thinks of Keisha, not just the medical bills, but the young woman she's raising. What kind of mother would she be if she chose money over morality? What lesson would that teach her daughter about standing up for what's right? Sandra's finger hovers over the 9 button as she watches Frank Harrison's life hanging in the balance, and Peter Lawson's desperate eyes promising consequences that could destroy her world forever. Sandra's trembling fingers dial 911 as Peter storms back into the room, his face twisted with rage. Hang up that phone right now, he shouts, lunging toward her. But it's too late, the call connects. This is 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice cuts through the chaos. This is Sandra Collins at Harrison Industries downtown, she says, backing away from Peter while keeping her eyes on Frank, who's now slumped dangerously in his chair. The CEO has been poisoned, his insulin was replaced with water. He's diabetic and going into shock. We need paramedics immediately. Peter's face goes white as he realizes the gravity of what's happening. You have no idea what you've just done, he hisses at Sandra. You think you're some kind of hero? You just destroyed both our lives. But Sandra stands her ground, her voice steady as she provides the dispatcher with the building's address and floor number. Years of protecting her own daughter have prepared her for this moment. She knows when someone's life hangs in the balance. Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoes through the downtown streets below. Sandra rushes to unlock the office doors while Peter paces frantically, making hushed phone calls. Yes, there's been a complication, she overhears him whisper. The maid figured it out. We need to accelerate the timeline. The paramedics burst through the office doors like a perfectly choreographed rescue team. Ma'am, what's the situation? The lead EMT asks Sandra while his partner immediately begins checking Frank's vitals. He's a type 1 diabetic, Sandra explains rapidly. He took what he thought was his insulin about an hour ago, but someone replaced it with water. His blood sugar must be through the roof by now. The paramedic nods grimly as he checks Frank's glucose levels. You're right, we're looking at severe diabetic ketoacidosis. Another 30 minutes in. He doesn't finish the sentence, but Sandra understands. Her quick thinking just saved a man's life. As they stabilize Frank with 4 fluids and real insulin, something remarkable happens. His eyes flutter open, unfocused but alive. What happened? He mumbles, trying to sit up. Don't move, sir, the paramedic instructs. You've had a severe diabetic episode. This young lady saved your life by calling us when she did. Frank's gaze shifts to Sandra, confusion clouding his features. But then, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, his expression sharpens. Peter, he whispers, his voice gaining strength. Where's Peter? Sandra turns to look, but the office is empty. Peter Lawson has vanished, leaving behind only his abandoned coffee cup and a sheaf of papers scattered across his desk. But something catches Sandra's eye, a printed email partially hidden under his keyboard. While the paramedics prepare Frank for transport, Sandra casually walks over to Peter's desk. What she sees makes her heart race, an email chain discussing Frank's upcoming board meeting, his potential resignation, and most chilling of all, a message that reads make sure the insulin switch happens during his morning routine. The timing has to be perfect. The email signature belongs to Margaret Westfield, the company's chief financial officer. Sandra, Frank calls weakly from the stretcher. I remember now. Peter was acting strange this morning, insisting on handling my morning medications himself. He said he wanted to make sure I was feeling my best for the board meeting. The paramedic checks Frank's for one more time. We need to get him to the hospital for full treatment, but he's stabilized. You did good, ma'am. Real good. As they wheel Frank toward the elevator, he reaches out to grab Sandra's hand. "Don't let them cover this up," he whispers urgently. Peter wasn't working alone. "Check his computer, check everything. I trust you." Sandra nods, her mind racing as she realizes the scope of what she's uncovered. This isn't just about Peter's jealousy or ambition, this is about a corporate conspiracy that goes straight to the top of Harrison Industries. But as the elevator doors close behind Frank and the paramedics, Sandra hears footsteps approaching from down the hallway. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving with purpose. She quickly grabs the incriminating emails from Peter's desk and stuffs them into her cleaning cart just as 3 security guards round the corner, their expressions anything but friendly. "Miss Collins," the lead guard says, his hand resting ominously on his radio. "Ms. Westfield needs to see you in her office. Right now." 3 days after Frank Harrison's near-death experience, the Harrison Industries boardroom buzzes with an energy unlike anything the company has ever witnessed. Sandra Collins sits at the polished mahogany table, her hands folded in her lap, facing a room full of detectives, lawyers, and executives. Frank sits beside her, his color finally returning after days of recovery, his eyes focused intently on every word she speaks. "Tell us again, Mrs. Collins, exactly what you observed about the insulin." Detective Martinez leans forward, his pen poised over his notepad. Sandra's voice is steady now, no longer trembling with uncertainty. "I've been cleaning Mr. Harrison's office for 3 years. I know his routine better than he does. When I saw him struggling that morning, something felt wrong. The vial looked different, clearer than usual. Insulin has a slight cloudiness to it when you hold it up to the light." Frank nods, remembering fragments of that terrifying morning. "I trusted Peter completely. He handled my medical supplies, my schedule, everything. I never questioned why I was feeling worse each day." The truth unfolds like a carefully orchestrated revelation. Peter Lawson, consumed by gambling debts and facing bankruptcy, had been systematically replacing Frank's insulin with distilled water over the course of 2 weeks. His plan was simple yet diabolical: let Frank fall into a diabetic coma during the board meeting where Peter was set to be named interim CEO. With Frank incapacitated, Peter would have complete control over the company's finances and accounts. "The security footage confirms everything," Detective Martinez announces, sliding photographs across the table. Peter accessing Frank's medical supplies after hours, purchasing distilled water from 3 different pharmacies to avoid suspicion, even researching diabetic coma symptoms on his work computer. Sandra watches as they lead Peter away in handcuffs, his face a mask of defeat and shame. The man who had tried to silence her with threats and bribes now shuffles past without making eye contact. Justice feels both heavy and liberating in this moment. Frank turns to Sandra, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You saved my life, Sandra. If you hadn't trusted your instincts, if you hadn't been brave enough to call for help despite the pressure, I couldn't live with myself knowing I could have helped and didn't," Sandra replies simply. "My daughter always tells me to do what's right, even when it's scary." The transformation in Frank Harrison is remarkable to witness. The man who barely acknowledged Sandra's presence for 3 years now sees her clearly, not as invisible help, but as the hero she truly is. He offers her a position as his executive assistant, complete with health insurance, college funds for her daughter, and a salary that will change her family's life forever. "I've learned something valuable about judgment," Frank addresses the room, his voice carrying new wisdom. "I misjudged the person closest to me and nearly missed the angel right in front of me." Sandra saw what others missed because she cared enough to pay attention. 6 months later, Sandra Collins walks through the Harrison Industries headquarters with confidence, her daughter's acceptance letter to pre-med programs tucked safely in her briefcase. The company has implemented new policies about workplace respect and recognition, with Sandra leading the charge on employee advocacy programs. Frank keeps a framed photo on his desk, not of corporate achievements or family vacations, but of Sandra receiving the city's Good Samaritan Award. It reminds him daily that heroism doesn't always wear a cape or carry credentials. Sometimes it comes in the form of a dedicated mother who refuses to look away when something doesn't feel right. The story of Sandra Collins proves that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they trust their instincts and choose courage over comfort. Her decision to taste that insulin and make that phone call didn't just save one life, it reminded an entire company about the power of seeing and valuing every person. In a world that often overlooks the quiet heroes among us, Sandra's story shines as a beacon of hope. She turned a moment of moral testing into a testament of character, showing us all that sometimes the smallest voice can make the biggest difference. What would you have done in Sandra's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of everyday heroes who changed the world one brave decision at a time.